So first of all, good morning to everyone joining us from across the world. And welcome to this Data Europa Academy workshop. So before diving into today's topics and agenda, introducing our speakers, let me first introduce myself. My name is Flora Copelou. I'm originally from Greece and I work for the Publication Office of the EU, specifically on data.europa.eu, which is the official portal for European data. For those who have previously attended our webinars and our workshops or are familiar with our portal, you already know that here in data.europa.eu, our core mission is to showcase the potential of open data and the open data use. So this is why we continue our webinars, and also we continue this dedicated workshop series for students, academics, and anyone actually curious about how to use open data for research. So today's goal is to give to those who are not familiar with the world of open data, with data.europa.eu, a first glimpse into our role, our services, how to use data sets. And for those who are also more advanced, we aim to show how to use this open data available on data.europa.eu in your research and provide examples of good practices from researchers that are already using it on a day-to-day basis. So before moving to today's agendas and introducing our speakers, I would like to take a moment to share the rules of today's workshop. So this session, as every Data Europe academic webinar, will be recorded, and both the recording and the slides will be shared with you after the session. So no worries about it if you missed something or if you joined a bit later. Please also take 3 minutes after the end of the workshop to help us by filling in our feedback form. You will also see it in the end of the session. We'll receive it also by mail. It's important for us to create a content that fits your needs. So please do take these few minutes to share with us your feedback. And lastly, for any questions, please feel free to use the chat. I already see that you are familiar using it, and we will make sure to answer them during the dedicated Q&A session. So, moving on, as previously mentioned, I'm not alone today. Thankfully, I have the pleasure of introducing our experts in the field of data analysis and open data, who will share with us their insightful cases and help us having an insightful session. First of all, we have Yomi During. Yomi is a senior consultant at Capgemini Invent, working on digital transformations of organizations. She is based in the Netherlands, and she has previously worked for the Dutch Central Bank, the UN, and the Red Cross. We are very happy to have you, Yomi. Then we have also Daniel Garijo. Daniel is a researcher at the Ontology Engineering Group in the Artificial Intelligence Department of the Computer Science faculty at Universidad Politécnica de Madrid. His research focuses on e-science and the semantic web, specifically on how to increase the understandability of research software and scientific workflows using the provenance and exposing them as knowledge graphs. So, as you can see, we have speakers with impressive data-oriented backgrounds, and we're looking forward for their interventions. So, moving on to today's agenda. We have already started, as you already see, with a short introduction. Following this, I will provide you with some more information on what is data.europa.eu for those that are attending for the first time, where you can find data sets in data.europa.eu, how you can navigate, and what other content we have within our portal. And then it will be the time, with the help of Yomi, that she will have 20 minutes to work together for a short case study on how to identify data sets from data.europa.eu and how to create, actually, with a simple data set, meaningful insights. Next, after this a short exercise, Danielle will provide us with information regarding the FAIR principles and inspire us with real use cases of open data from the Universidad Politécnica de Madrid. And finally, we will close the session, as always, with Q&A, where we will collect your questions and address them to the speakers. So, let's learn more. Let's deep dive a bit more on data.europa.eu. Starting with the basics, for those that are attending for the first time our workshop, our webinar, for those that maybe received, someone forward them the invitation and maybe a colleague or someone that they know and said that maybe this will be beneficial for potentially using that in your research. What is open data? So open data is data that anyone can access, use, and share. It is like a raw material for the digital age, but unlike coal or diamonds, it can be used by anyone and everyone simultaneously. So any restriction imposed on the use of open data limit its potential for creating new value. Open data can bring diverse benefits. You can see that diverse benefits to governments, businesses, as well as individuals. So it has the power to help improve services with the right usage of it, to grow economies, to even protect our planet. Open data becomes usable when made available in a common machine-readable format. It must be licensed to permit people to use the data in any way they want, including transforming, combining, and sharing it with others, even commercially. So open data, as you can see, can create impact in many, many different ways. So what is data.europa.eu? Data.europa.eu is the official portal for European data. It is managed by the Publications Office of the European Union with the Director General DG of the European Commission. What is our main role within data.europa.eu is to support the data supply and data use. So we support data providers who bring data to us, we harvest their portals, and we provide services to the people like you who want to use open data, our data users coming across Europe and beyond. A background of why we are here. So data.europa.eu has been already initially set up by the European Commission, and this is part to implement the EU open data and reuse policies under the legal acts that have been adopted by the EU institutions and the EU member states. Our main goal is to create this bridge between our data providers, that most of the times these data providers could be EU institutions and agencies, geoportals, national portals, and while we either harvest, directly, we harvest directly those portals, and with the open data that we have, we want to make them accessible and easily accessible to our data users. That these data users might be researchers, developers, other public administrations, private companies, journalists, you name it, a plethora of people that are interested in the world and the usage of open data. So in a nutshell, as you mentioned, we are indeed a central point of access to open data, but it's not this. We're not limited to this, because if we want to create value and we want also to make people use open data for research, use open data to create impact, we want to improve. We're working through the academy and through other initiatives to improve also data literacy. We are working to create a community by organizing conferences, by communicating via our social media, our newsletter, and we're also working on creating publications with reports, studies relevant for our audience. So what is our goal in data.europa.eu? First of all, data. We connect data, we harvest data. Out of this data, we want to create information, that this information then is transformed into knowledge. So first and foremost, And here I would like a bit of your attention, because this part will be important for the case study of Yomi afterwards. So pay a bit of attention to this part in case you're not familiar with data.europa.eu. Data.europa.eu is a data hub. So it means that you can access data. And how you can do that? You can simply click data.europa.eu. You can visit our homepage, go to the data section, and then find the quick search. And when you click on the quick search, you will see that we have more than 1.7 million datasets from 183 data providers, and the datasets are growing and growing and growing. In order to navigate through these 1.7 million datasets, thankfully, we do have filters. We have ways, to improve the way of searching. You cannot use free text, obviously, in case you are searching, for a specific data set related to the circular economy. You can write circular economy and search and find more information related to this. If you know the format you are searching for, we have CSV, we have XML, more formats. You can filter on the specific format. If you know the publisher that you are looking for, again, feel free, you can find ways to filter it. And it's easy. You find your dataset, you can download it in the selected format, and you can benefit also of the metadata translations that we have in all EU languages. Take your time, familiarize yourself. I have to say that personally, I'm not a pro, but I found it very user-friendly going through this. And in case you find any issues in the future, you are searching for a specific data set, you are not able to find it, or you have any questions, you can always reach out to us via our contact form in our page. And we have my colleagues that are specialists and they have a technical background that can help you identify these data sets and answer to any of your questions. Then moving to data.europa.eu as an information hub. Because open data, yes, we do have these data sets there, but we are also interested into providing you with content that can inspire you on your research. And for this reason, we have created data stories that we publish on the monthly basis. And these data stories can provide you with content on the usage of open data, for example, on agriculture, rural development. I think yesterday we published one on the upcoming European elections. So do visit our page and try to go through the section to figure out the stories that you will be interested to read. We do have podcasts with experts from different areas of open data. We do have studies. We have news pieces that help you stay up to date with our latest news on open data. We have the newsletter that we recommend you to go through, like to subscribe, so we can stay up to date with events that are taking place, like the event that we're organizing today. And we also have a dedicated event section regarding the open data events that are taking place across Europe and beyond. Lastly, our role as a knowledge hub. As some of you might already know or have already seen, we're part of the Data Europe Academy. Our Data Europe Academy is the open data knowledge hub of data.europa.eu. So especially if you are a student researcher and you want to learn more about the world of open data, we have dedicated 11 thematic courses with different areas. We have, for example, for someone that just joined today, has no idea what is open data, we do have a course called Introduction to Open Data. So you can go through this course. If someone of you is more interested on the legal background of open data, we do have a dedicated course. If someone has a more technical background, we have curious to know more about the quality of metadata. Once again, we have a course for you. If you want to use open data, but you're not sure how you can find ways, to visualize your data on the best way possible, we have a data visualization guide. So there's so much content available for you and available designed on the different needs that you might have. And we have training material that can be from beginners to advanced, from public sector to students and researchers. And once again, I recommend you that if you don't find something, you can always reach out to us via the contact form, because we have people that are working there and are eager to help each one of you to find the specific content or data set you might be looking forward to find. And I think this is my last slide. But before giving the floor to Yomi, once again, I'm going back to remind you, in order to find the dataset, you can go to data.europa.eu, go to quick search, and use the free text and the multiple filters that we have there. So I don't want to spoil a lot of stuff. I give immediately now the floor to Yomi that we will put us to actually do an exercise with her help. So Yomi, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Flora, and very good to give already some tips ahead. I prepared a case for you, so to get you started with the data.europa.eu portal. And as Flora mentioned, this is like the key basics. And if you want to have more advanced, you have the academy to suit as you need. So for the case, this is the situation. Imagine first, in the case at the end, you will actually know how to find the data set, how to download it, how to understand the data set. And I give also an impression of how an analysis based on such a data set could look like. So imagine the situation where you're in a team of data analysts and you work closely with the EU, and you're doing research on midwife and nurse coverage in the EU. And you're asked to carry out a couple of tasks. And the first task is, of course, to find the data set they can use or you can use for your research. And for that, you will use the data.europa.eu portal. And for the research, you're asked to get information on the inhabitants per nursing and caring professionals, historically from the 80s till 21. So Flora had already given some indications how to do it. Once you found the data set, you can use the access link to download it. Download it in CSV format. You will see you need to do some transformations to eventually get the data in an Excel. And I share two links in the chat of how to do the transformations that you will need to carry out. So in the end, you will have an Excel with the data on nursing and caring professionals. So I will give you about 3 minutes and then we go quickly through it. And if there are any questions, you can put them in the chat and we are there to help you further.
Perfect. In the same time, I'm also accessing data.europa.eu, and I'm trying to find the data set. I see some people have already found it, which is good to hear.
Also, it's good to know it's not always necessary to do the conversions. Sometimes you get also straight to CSV. So yeah, it depends on the data set.
Exactly. And once again, for future use, if there is a data set that you cannot make a conversion or there is any potential issue you might have, again, you can contact us via our contact form where we will have our specialist in the team helping you. But not today. Today we are just focusing on this specific particular data set, and we will have also Yomi give us more guidance in a few minutes.
Yeah, and YouTube is always a good friend as well. So let's see. Don't worry if you're still working on it, because I will share the Excel in the chat, so you can download it later, and then you can follow the second task. So here a quick few steps of how you could get the data set. So on the website we have the data tab, step 1. Step 2, we can enter the keywords, or if we already know the name of the data set, we can enter it there. Then we get all the data sets that are related to the keywords. And step 4, we can download it using the access button. And the links, after you would need to extract the CSV from a GZ file and then convert the CSV to an Excel. And as I said, it's not always the case. So for the second task, you might already have opened the data set and seen that there are a lot of codes in it, and you wonder, okay, what's in there? It's hard to figure out what they exactly mean. But also data.europa.eu has information on how to decipher these codes. And that's the second exercise. Try to understand what the data actually means now, so that you can check if you can use it for the purpose that you have in mind. For that, I give you already a tip. If you go back to the website where you have downloaded your data set, you find a light blue box at the right side with some metadata. And so it mentions when is it created, when is the data set uploaded, and then also the landing page. If you click on that link, you go back to the original location of the data set. And there you usually have information on the context of the data set, but also the interpretation of codes that's being used. And so that's the next exercise. Try to find this landing page and go through it and try to understand now what is exactly in this data set. Again, I will give you about 3 minutes for this. And in the chat, you find the Excel. That will make it easier to go through the data.
for those that might be just joining us now, just because we are silent, just to let you know that we are currently working on an exercise with a dataset from data.europa.eu. So in case you are not, you're just joining, just you can wait for us to finalize the exercise. And as always, the recording and slides will be available. So thank you and welcome.
Yes, I saw in the chat someone's posting time is a time period in the Excel. Yeah, it's true. It's not always exact. It depends also on the data maturity, how well it is. How well it's how well it is archived. So it depends very much on the provider of the data. Which is also the case, is that you get a contact person somewhere, and then you can also ask or mail the contact person to have further clarification. The time and the time periods, it is more straightforward, but I can imagine if we're talking about codes, then I would suggest reaching out to the contact person. So if you look at the landing page, then in this case it looks like this. Also, it depends, of course, on the provider of the data set. And here we can see that at the left column we have the different data points that in the data set. So that's actually, in this case, it's the title row at the top of the data set in the Excel. And then if you click on it, you see the values that's inside such a data set and with an explanation behind it. So in this case, on the slide, you see the codes for the different categories to which the data is referring to. And you see like OC 222. Without these translations, I wouldn't know what it really means. So it's here you would find the metadata. Also, in this case, you see above the light gray box, you see default and full data set. So in this case, if you click full data set, you get more information on the meaning. I suggest, because every site is a bit different, to click a little bit around and then figure out what exactly everything means and where to find it. So now that we know understand the data set better, we would like to know, okay, can we use it for our research? And so I came up with 3 questions. We don't have enough time here to do the full analysis. I'm sure in the academy there are courses that will guide you and you can practice with. But here it's actually 3 answers which are just yes and no answers. And the question here is, okay, for these 3 questions, are you able to use to answer these questions with the data set that you now have at hand? And I will share a survey where you can input your answers. One moment.
Okay, I see that the answers are coming. Yomi, while we're waiting for people to answer, maybe you can share it with us. How was it for you also going through data.europa.eu, identifying the data sets? How did you find it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think in the beginning it is really a bit like trial and error, a lot of clicking around, also trying different data sets on the same topic because to get used to how data is organized. So in my experience, it's at the start really a lot of trying out, finding a certain data sets, clicking on it. Maybe first time I didn't find it directly, also the metadata, but then I went to another data set and then I went back and then I had already more experience and could get around better. Also in this one in particular, it can also sometimes be a bit confusing. So if you feel like that, it's normal. It's also again practice. For example, this one, if you look at the categories with the midwives and the nurses, there are different combinations. With the data background, I would think sometimes maybe a bit weird organized. Also, again, the more you practice, the easier it is to get the feel like what part you need, how to also interpret the data, and then see, yeah, and then find out how to use it. But I really recommend to look into the academy for very specific topics. Um,
I would probably say that maybe some of the challenges that we are seeing also in the chat is that when a data set is described, the format, not only the format, but the vocabulary used to capture what the columns mean is different, right? So while the portal captures in a standard way the metadata for the description of the data sets, the description of the variables that are described within a data set is unique, or, well, it follows the convention that each uploader wanted to do. So if I added midwife as a column and you added, I don't know, um, another name like housewives or something like that, then we wouldn't know whether we would be referring to the same thing unless it's clearly explained in the metadata. And even if it was in the metadata, it would be up to the person who searches to determine whether these two things are the same or not. And I think that's one of the challenges right now when doing data integration from data.europa. But this is, I mean, this is not a solved problem, right? It's a
yeah,
common data integration problem in the web.
yeah, exactly. This is not specifically for this. If you go look elsewhere, I can assure you from experience, you find also a lot of similar other challenges concerning the data quality or the way it's organized, how to use it. If you're working with data, that's something, a very valuable skill to learn how to deal with those things.
Exactly. And I see that the chat is on fire, but we just can keep as a summary that it's testing, familiarizing yourself with the platform, making the right questions, and it's trial and error all the time in order to figure out what is valuable for you and how you can use it for your potential research.
Yes, I see quite some answers already in. Also, if you want to later on continue with it, it will be recorded and the slides will be shared, so you can also take another look at it. So if you go back to the presentation, actually the answers to these questions are all yes. With the data set, you can answer these 3 questions. Well, at first glance, of course. A long analysis, you come often also across insights on the quality of the data. But as I said, that is really anywhere. So we are not going to do the analysis or make the graphs here, but I did prepare this a possible answer to show you how it can be used to do an analysis. So for the first question was, what are the top 3 and the bottom 3 countries in terms of midwife coverage in 2020? So here I selected the data of 2020, I filtered it, and then I used the inhabitants per midwife as a proxy, as a metric to midwife coverage. And I also took the variable countries because we want to do the comparison. And in this case, we see that the top 3 are Belgium, Serbia, and Turkey. And the bottom are Spain, Italy, and Luxembourg, having lower coverage. And also another thing that caught my eye quickly was that the top 3 have about 6 times less inhabitants per midwife compared to the bottom 3. Now, I was thinking, yeah, okay, why is there such a difference? By the way, I don't have a background in this, but from this graph, I can get some interesting information. So could it be that the quality of midwife services are better in Belgium because they have more coverage, or maybe it's just that the other countries have the bottom countries have just more efficient system. So these are questions that are interesting, leads to further further research. So then I thought, okay, let me come up with the next question of like, if I take the top, because if I compare the two, how come they are so different? So if I now take Belgium, which was the top one, how did it evolve over the years to better understand why it's, you have some clues of why it's so high, the coverage. So then we see that over the 40 years of data we have, it doubled over time, and especially but in the 10 years between 98 and 2008. So then I was wondering, okay, what happened in that period of time? Was there a policy change? Was there a lot of investment in education? Maybe a shortage was there was a shortage, and it was covered by promoting migrating midwives from abroad. So these are all questions that when I would do research on this, I would be interested in knowing more about based on this information I got of this graph. So then I thought, okay, if in those 10 years there is such an increase in coverage, then is it also happening in for other professionals in health? So I thought, okay, let's look at the coverage of nurses, and I took the same period of time, and I saw, okay, there's also doubling in coverage, also in 10 years, but 10 years after the doubling of the midwives. And I thought that could also be interesting. Why is it afterwards? Did some policy that have been applied and they were very happy about it? Did they apply it to the nurses? Or there might be a lot of other reasons, but quite interesting leads when I would be doing research on this. Also, we see that in 2019, the coverage halved in 1 year. So it might also be interesting what happened in 1 year. Is it realistic? Or was there an error in the measurements? And another thing that can be observed is that the data doesn't go back as far as the midwife data. And also that, what I said earlier, in this case, you can still do some, it can be still useful because we have some still a time period left, but some cases it might be not sufficient, and that's also something that you might come across when dealing with data. Again, it's any data analysis, wherever you get the data set from, this happens. But this is to show you quickly that this data can provide a lot of information and give you a lot of leads in how to continue, make better questions for your research, or have also qualitative research being backed up with data. You can look into policies, start reading documents, doing interviews. So I think it's without a background in health, I think it's super interesting. Now, even now, I actually want to know what happened. But yeah, my career is something else. So if you're doing research, and you can always let me know what the conclusion is. But with this, I want to show that with data, you can do a lot of things and you can save a lot of time. This data.europa.eu contains, Flora mentioned it, more than 1.7 million data sets. Imagine that you're doing research and you have to start collecting your data yourself, putting up the surveys. It's so convenient, it's already out there. It would be a waste of time to start collecting yourself. Also, if you would want to search it elsewhere, you Google it. I mean, these data sets all come from all those different providers. Well, you have to click on each provider and then look there on their website for the data set, and it might likely that you come across the same data set. So with this portal, you have everything actually bundled, and you have one interface. So yeah, if I would do PhD or research or work for any company, I would definitely use it. So yeah, that's to give a brief introduction to what you can do with the data, how to get your data, how to interpret it, and show you that it's really useful to use it. That's for the case. Again, if you're wanting more advanced, make better use of it, then the academy is always there. So yeah, if you still have questions, put it in the chat, and then Daniel will give a specific use case on use of data, open data.
Perfect.
So
thank you so much, Yomi. Thank you so much for this exercise. I think you have already warmed up our audience, and now we can also get inspired by the story and the experience of Daniel. So, Daniel, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you very much. I've been answering some questions in the chat, but please, my answers or my contribution, do not take that as an authoritative source. I just speak from my experience when using the portal, right? So I just did the best I could. Anyway, we're gonna be switching gears in this presentation a little bit. I hope that you find it interesting and informative. Because it's a little bit more focused towards the scientific domain. But nonetheless, I think it has a lot of relationship with what we have seen. Let me see. Okay, I need to click. So let me start with a little bit of motivation and the importance of open data for the scientific domain. As I said, I work a lot in open science and also on metadata representation and how to represent the information in a structured manner. Why? Because in our group, we do a lot of data integration. We create knowledge graphs so we can build these queries such as the ones that we need for the previous presentation a little bit more easily, right? And the main thing I wanted to start with is with a 2017 study that was done in Nature, where they issued the following question to the research, to the scientific community. They basically asked everyone whether they thought there was a reproducibility crisis in science, and to surprise of some and to the non-surprise of many, I think 90% of people agreed that there was at least a slight reproducibility crisis, with over 50% of the scientists stating that there was a significant crisis. Usually, when there is a reproducibility crisis, it is because two main reasons. The first one is that you cannot access the data, so you don't have the access to the results of the paper, or you don't have access to the methods that were used to produce the results of the paper, no? And and they also asked scientists from different domains whether they had also failed to reproduce their own experiments or someone else's experiments. And this is what I think is very interesting, no? That for many of the domains, so basically it did not matter the domain, that many scientists acknowledge that at least they had not been able to reproduce their own experiments at least once. So this is not like it was happening often, but at least once in their life, they had not been able to reproduce their past work, either because their data sets were not ready, were not available, or because their methods, that is the software, the workflows, etc., were not, had been maybe left in a computer that later was erased, or they changed institutions and the data is not available anymore. There are many of excuses. All right, so to give even a little bit more motivation, now we have even studies from Bayer where they have failed to replicate many of the studies that were published in research publication, and new organizations like the Retraction Watch, they track a record of these journals that have retracted papers to warn the rest of the community. All right, so that's a little bit of motivation. Moving on, we have seen a lot of work made by the scientific community to put a halt to that problem, and traditional papers that included typically text with a narrative of the method, basically what had happened, have turned into modern published articles that include not only the text but also the data. And data sometimes is added as supplementary materials, but sometimes is a link to a data set that is stored somewhere. And what happens to that link? Well, what happens is that sometimes, even after publishing the paper, that link stops being available, right? That's known as link rot. And we have even moved from these modern published papers to reproducible papers that not only take the narrative and the data, but also make an effort to put the software and the provenance and the methods in a little bit more structured manner and clear way associated with the papers. When I'm talking about papers, I think this also applies to the project reports or the studies that you do, like, for example, what we saw in the previous presentation. No, so we saw these conclusions with the midwives and um, and so on. But the first question is, okay, well, where did you get the data from, right? So that's the provenance information of the study. And what operations did you perform to the original data to actually get this figure? That's the method, right? So very important, even when we are not talking about science. And in this context, we have seen, the evolution of these efforts have culminated into a community effort called the FAIR Principles, which, I pasted the paper published in 2016, but now it's when it's really getting traction with a policy from the European Commission, for example, into FAIR. FAIR stands for Findable, Accessible, Interoperable, and Reusable. And let me explain a little bit what this means. So what does it mean for a data set to be findable? To be findable is not only that you put the data set on the web in your server, right? Because then that's only findable to you. It means that you give it a permanent identifier and that you use rich metadata like, what does this dataset contain? That the metadata include a pointer to the identifier of the dataset. Usually you have the metadata of the dataset and then the pointer from the metadata to the identifier of the dataset, and that the metadata is indexed in a searchable engine. For example, in case you don't know, there are other portals apart from data.europa.eu Google Dataset Search is also a very nice portal for public datasets. And this is powered by Google, right? So probably many of the datasets in data.europa.eu will also be available here. But the point is that your dataset is not only on your website. The point is that you also have this data found in one of these portals because, well, people don't know where your dataset is. They are probably going to search Google or search data.europa.eu, right? The second part is on being accessible. Being accessible, basically, this is a little bit more techy way of describing that it should be available with an open protocol that supports authentication basically using HTTPS if you are on the web, right? And that the metadata should also be accessible itself. That is, that I can do queries to a portal without necessarily having to download the data itself. The next part is the interoperability, and here is where we have seen the big friction when doing the previous exercise, right? So there is the need for interoperability on the metadata that is, well, if I describe datasets using some keyword identifiers and you use metadata with another complete different vocabulary, then we are just gonna find some issues because we don't even know what the title of that dataset is. And then there is the notion of the interoperability of the keywords used in the dataset itself. For example, how do I know that my dataset talks about midwives and yours talks about nurses, right? There has to be some interoperability in the schemas in order to make sure that we can integrate the data together. And finally, it's the reusability part, which comes into, well, that metadata of the dataset has to be properly described, that the dataset has to have some certain documentation, that the license of the metadata, the license of the data should be clear because otherwise I don't even know whether I can reuse it for my application or study, and that the metadata meets domain relevant community standards. For example, if I'm describing a dataset in climate, there are climate specific keywords that I should include. And it's not up to a general body to determine what is going to be how to interchange things in climate. It's up to the climate community to agree on what are the important fields to include, right? So based on that, I cannot jump into this link over here, but based on what we have seen, we can say, okay, well, how does data.europa.eu adopt the FAIR principles? And I would say that pretty well, no? Because if you go to a dataset, you have many of these requirements. You have the findability, each dataset is described with metadata on what is the title. Every data set is accessible. The metadata is machine readable. I'm not sure if you have seen, but you can even download the metadata in a structured format using a standard W3C standard, which is called the data catalog, DCAT, and that is commonly used for describing entries in data catalogs. And even if you go to the quality tab for a dataset, you'll see that the portal is telling you about the accessibility, the reusability, and other fields regarding that dataset, right? Is it like the perfect solution? Well, no, there are still fields to be improved, right? For example, some of the friction we have seen is regarding the interoperability of the variables that are described within a dataset, which is a super challenging task. As I was stating in the chat, for example, I have used the data.europa.eu to look for common procurement vocabulary codes, which are basically how the contracts are awarded by different companies supported by the European Union. And CPVs is a common procurement vocabulary that is used to assign what the nature of that contract, like construction, or they are buying office supplies and so on. Just the description of the nature of contracts is a vocabulary, or they have more than thousands and thousands of codes. And this is a very specific domain. right? So imagine if I had to do this for all sciences, for all the things that are described in more than 1 million datasets. It's a very challenging task. But nonetheless, this is a huge step forward to help adopt the FAIR principles. And also, one thing that is very, very important is that FAIR is not always a proxy for high quality datasets. I could have a very bad quality dataset that is described very good meta and that is accessible and reusable and fair. But when I go and I see the quality of the data, then I say, oh, okay, so this was just generated automatically with ChatGPT. Well, maybe that's not a dataset that I want to include anyway, right? So fair, it's not a proxy for high quality. However, high quality datasets must be fair because those have to be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable by the community. All right. So, given that small introduction to the FAIR principles, in case you had not heard them before, I'm going to switch a little bit gears into open data and citizen science. And the question to, okay, do we really need FAIR in here? And I hope that by the end of the presentation, I have convinced you that we actually need FAIR. So, citizen science, for those who don't know, it's the participation of citizens in the research life cycle. Basically, how? Well, producing data or producing data analysis. And in general, what this means is that things that you, as a scientist, you cannot typically do, which is collect many observations, you crowdsource among a community of enthusiasts. So, for example, if you're collecting observations, then I can convince many people to install a sensor in their houses to measure the pollution of a city, and that way I get a lot of data. At the same time, I may get data of less quality because some of these observations may be collected by non-expert. So let me show you what I want, an example of how quality may vary across use cases with a case of light pollution. So for light pollution, this is a topic that one of my students was very passionate about. And when I was creating this presentation, he was like, "Oh yeah, let's please let me talk about this because it's super nice." And he is the co-author of these slides. So light pollution is very important for many reasons because apparently it affects how we sleep at night very much, and it also affects the nature surrounding cities and so on. There are several initiatives to collect light pollution because it's not something that is very easy to measure. And Globe at Night is one of such applications in order to raise public awareness of the impact of light pollution. But all the observations in this platform, in this application, are collected by hand. So the citizens are assumed to have astronomical expertise, and you may have some data quality issues because not everyone is an astronomical expert, right? However, they managed to collect more than 180,000 observations over the past 12 years. And I would say that in the quality spectrum, this is at the human-based observation, right? Then we go into the next stage of quality, which is hybrid observations. And basically, Loss of the Night is another application where they use software to guide some of these observations. In that sense, it's still manual, but you can use the software to help you detect what may be the right observation that you are looking at night. Basically, it's the software helps you see the right star from where you are, and it helps you tag what is the star that you may be looking at, but still prone to errors, right? Next, we have a paid application which is called Dark Sky Meter, which uses the iPhone camera to give a little bit more of an authoritative measurement, because it's not you doing the annotation directly, it's you using the iPhone's camera, right? And an external weather forecast service. So the quality of the data that you gather is a little bit enhanced. And finally, it would be like the perfect setting, which is the Nix Nox project on this URL on test.starsforall.eu, where basically they are encouraging different people to deploy sensors to automatically perform the measurements. And in this case, well, there may be quality issues if the sensor is broken, but you know that the quality in general obtained from the sensors is at the maximum possibility, right? And I think this project in particular is very cool because they have sensors deployed all over the world, over 160, and you can basically get information worldwide. So coming back to the role of FAIR in citizen science, we have seen the different spectrum of data quality that you may obtain in citizen science, right? And contrasting it with FAIR, now the idea is, okay, so I have data of this ranging quality. What I need to make sure, or what FAIR brings into the table, is that if we provide each dataset with its own identifier, proper metadata on what is the type of observations that I'm including in the dataset, and quality metadata, I will be able to integrate the different datasets of varying quality according to my expectations. For example, I will be able to do some filtering. In addition, if we manage to use the same format for all the data sets, then I will be able to integrate all the information from them in a way, well, in a way that is frictionless, right? So in this case, bringing FAIR into the table, combining FAIR and citizen science leads to reproducible science for this domain. And let me end with the cherry on top, which is usually the unseen consequences, but in a good way, right? So, for example, NASA is one of the organizations that usually care a lot about open science and putting the research products in an open way, following FAIR. Thanks to this, we have a colleague of ours, actually a colleague of my student, who was also doing his PhD on light pollution, and looked at some of these pictures that NASA had released. It was a collection of pictures of cities at night. And thanks to this and the metadata associated with this, he was able to use it in their papers for measuring light pollution, because these were a series of observations that he was able to find and properly reference, that would not have been able otherwise. So he used these products, he used them as supporting material in his thesis, and he published the results in Zenodo. Zenodo is another data archive supported by the European Union. And I wanted to basically end with this because I think it's a very nice combination of how kind of using FAIR and sometimes in the products that are created for another purpose ends up being a very, very cool way for pushing forward science. I will put the link to Zenodo in the chat in a little bit. And with that, I end my presentation. I think that I've been in time, and thank you very much. I'll be happy to answer the questions in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Daniel, for this inspiring presentation. I have seen that the chat is really, really on fire. Maybe now it's a good time to move to the Q&A session. I am also wondering if Yomi is here with us. I will move to this view. So let's give a second to see if Yomi can join us. Yes, we're here. So I have to say that everyone is still very much excited about the exercise that you put in place, Yomi. So I see a lot of discussions regarding how to filter, and I already see that you have answered to the majority of the questions. I don't know if you want to summarize, if there's a general comment that you want to give regarding this exercise to everyone that contributed, everyone that participated today.
Yeah, thanks for participating. It's really nice to see the comments. Yeah, one thing that I thought was really good, interesting finding was the format of the data. Someone asked me, okay, I downloaded, I was looking at the metadata and I got a lot of code. It the data can come in so many different types of formats, unfortunately. So if you see, if you see a certain format, it's figuring out what format it is, and then figuring out how to convert it in a more readable format. In this case, it was a JSON. Yeah, it's something that depends on the person that uploads how they store their metadata. It would be quite interesting if it would be possible to build a certain software so that can actually extract it and all organize it and recognize which format it is. But that would be really huge. Quite big
I
project.
have some comments on that.
Yeah.
So, if I sorry for interrupting. So,
No.
if I may, very quickly, there are European projects right now that are trying to build data type registries where basically they are trying to capture the mappings between the different vocabularies that are used to describe data, right? So the idea is that we would know that, oh, if you use in the climate sciences, right? If you use rain in this column and it's precipitation in this other one, you know that there is a mapping. And in terms of data integration, it helps, no? Because so what you're calling this here, it's this over there. This sounds trivial. It's not trivial. And sometimes there are many discussions just to know whether two different columns are the same. But there are open initiatives that are going on in this regard, and it's probably one of the most challenging aspects right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because you have to have the mapping in place.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a great
Uh,
input.
and another thing, if you're not don't have a data background, but you're doing research and you do want some data, and often these days you will, then make sure you make good friends with your colleague, with a colleague or another student who is in data, in informatics or data science.
No, no. Just to give an example, I remember that there was a person who came into my lab once, and he gave a presentation on indicators, which is also a nightmare. And he was trying to build a graph very similar to the one that you did, but this one was on how many students were in a city. And in order, because this was an indicator of ranking of cities or worldwide, right? And just to give you a glimpse, also the definition of what we may think something is the same is very important, because some cities consider someone who is driving to learn a student. Some other cities only consider a student a person who works at or studies in a faculty or a university. Or how do you consider students the kids that attend to school? So all these questions sometimes are not considered, and that's why you have sometimes these data gaps between countries. That it's like, oh, why there are so many in this country and so many in this country? Because in the definition they consider this and they do not consider that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I saw
very
it
good one.
in parallel. Also, the chat has already been on fire. I already see that there is a question for you, Daniel. Do you have a reference to the mapping of metadata you just mentioned?
There, I know that there is one for mappings from the Faircore for EOSC project, and it is the data type registry. Let me see if I can find the link.
Perfect, perfect. In the meantime, while you're trying to find a link, now that we have opened this question, and because this is a workshop to use open data for research and for analysis, I want to ask you, Yomi, for your experience, what would you recommend to someone that is trying their journey on data analysis and on data analysis on using open data? What would be your recommendations for the beginning of someone, a new a beginner in this journey of data analysis?
Yeah, and first in this time, um, in these times, I think data is so powerful. So I would actually anyone, any background, recommend to at least get basic knowledge on dealing with data. A second is don't give up. Never give up on data. I can give you an example. I work a lot with data for clients, and there are two things that is always challenge: quality, availability, and yeah, understandability. And that's also building on the discussion earlier. I think the analysis is the what everybody, most people agree on, is only 20% of your work when you're dealing with data. So I think most of the time you're doing the part that we did for a small data set. I also saw in the chat someone comment, I don't want to contact the contact person or the owner of the data. Yeah, maybe it's not necessary. For me, working with clients, also on the data quality, and also what Danielle told you, how what does what mean? Is there overlap? It was always very valuable and actually indispensable to have contact with the owners and with most of the users or the business, we call it, the clients, to really understand what the data is. Yeah, it's
Right.
always part of our work, yeah, and it helps a lot. Also, save you time, and to make sure your analysis is what actually represents
That
what you
sounds
want to know and get the
good.
insights. So yeah, I would say get into it, learn, and don't give up. And in the end, it's so rewarding when you get the
Mhm.
analysis done. And it's also these days it's very powerful to have actual numbers to back up your conclusions and reasoning. People can really, yeah, see it.
Exactly.
Very
And the
powerful.
understanding of data could be, it could be data analysis, like you can be on the side of the more technical side. You can be just there, in more the high level understanding of like data is everywhere around us.
Yeah.
I see already, Danielle, that you have answered the question, because there was a question, what do you think that is the role of data stewards? And maybe you would like a bit to elaborate on your answer, Danielle.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's a very important role because data stewards help align. So they are the ones who probably have the expertise of you should if this is this type of data, you should probably use this and that vocabularies, right? And this is how you should describe metadata and why this metadata is important. Because otherwise, if you don't have this extra context, I my impression is that people often say, "Well, don't care." and the thing about putting things online properly, take this may be a selfish point of view, right? Do not necessarily do it because you wanted to share it with others. Do it because for your future self, when you want to make sure that, I don't know, go back to that data and review it, you will understand everything that happened to that data source. And you make want to, for example, another student comes and you want to reuse some data set that was produced in a previous project. You want to make sure that that student does not spend 1 month as analyzing the data and trying to figure out what the hell went on when building that data set. So even if you think this is a little bit of a waste of time to spend time describing things with metadata, and uh, then think about this other reason I am giving you. Also, I think it's important to talk to data stewards, because otherwise what I've seen is that they sit a little bit on their ivory tower, and they issue recommendations for everyone. And then when you're like, well, how do I implement this here, then they see, oh, well, this recommendation that I'm adding actually may not be realistic because it's a lot of work for a very little gain. So talking to them also may make sure to help make realistic recommendations, which I think it's key if we want to see their adoption.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Daniel. I don't know if, Yomi, you want to add something on this. What is your viewpoint?
Yeah, I completely agree that metadata is very valuable, very time saving, but something that's being overlooked. Yeah, a lot. Yeah.
Perfect. So
So
I think maybe we can wrap up this session. I actually enjoyed so much this session that I might stay even more to discuss with you. We're close to the end, so what I will go back to the presentation, and I will remind to everyone and each one of you, because I see that many of you are leaving, to please provide your feedback. You can see on top we have the link. You can access our survey, or you can just use the QR code that we are sharing. This is so beneficial because then we will continue creating content and have guest speakers like the speakers we have today. I mean, it was really for me a pleasure to have both of you here. I think it was such a smooth discussion. So please do provide us our feedback, come up with ideas, let us know what you liked, what you didn't like. We appreciate that a lot. And before leaving, we have a lot of activities under the academy. We have a very, very, very busy June. So come join us for more webinars. We will have a webinar on the high value datasets, because I know that someone also mentioned the high value datasets. Please do join us. We have a webinar on the 14th of June. We have a webinar on the European Drug Report. So if you're curious to know more about data visualization, such an interesting webinar taking place on the 21st of June. And then on the 28th of June, we have a webinar on the use case observatory, one of our latest, one of our most popular reports, that we will have actually people creating applications coming and let us know what is the progress on the application they have created with the use of open data. So once again, thank you so much. I will close with these slides so you can share with us your feedback. Thanks for the positive feedback. Thanks to Daniel. Thanks to Yomi. It was a pleasure having the discussion. Let's do that again. So thanks a lot, and wishing all a very, very nice weekend. Thank you.
yes, thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming. Bye bye.
Bye.